Welcome to Motivation at Hand, Ma. To know is to know how. Part 10. Case 123-CR00257 TSC Document 139 filed November 6, 2023, in the United States District Court for the District of Columbia, United States of America versus Donald J. Trump, defendant. Government's omnibus opposition to defendant's motions to dismiss the indictment on statutory and constitutional grounds. B. The defendant's historical examples do not raise fair notice concerns. The defendant's attempt electric case filing, ECF, number 113 at 25, to avoid this conclusion by pointing to a long history of purportedly similar conduct in past elections. Claiming that the absence of prosecution stemming from these elections somehow precludes him from having fair notice of the charges here, fails in at least two respects. First, the absence of prior prosecutions is not equivalent to a line of judicial precedent treating the conduct at issue as non-criminal. And the concept of fair notice does not require the extreme level of factual specificity, linear, 520 U.S. at 268, that the defendant envisions. Second, the defendant's invocation of history fails on its own terms. Footnote 17. At this stage of the proceedings, what might have inspired ECF number 113 at 25, the defendant's actions is irrelevant. The issue of the defendant's intent is a matter for trial, and whether his intent was informed by any historical examples would require, at the very least, evidence that the defendant was aware of them. As set forth below, even a brief review of the 7 elections the defendant cites demonstrates just how dissimilar, and historically aberrant, the defendant's conduct was in this case. The 1800 election. In the election of 1800, see ECF number 113 at 25, 29, 31, ECF number 114 at 30, 31. Thomas Jefferson, the sitting vice president and a presidential candidate at 30, 31. was presiding over the joint session when he observed that George's envelope contained only a single sheet of paper, which was a technically defective electoral ballot written on the back of the certificate of ascertainment. See Bruce Ackerman and David Fontana, How Jefferson Counted Himself in The Atlantic, March 2004. Despite these technical defects, Jefferson counted the votes, which were 4 each for himself and Aaron Burr. Same as, by all accounts, Jefferson's decision furthered the will of the voters and the actions of the electors. Newspaper articles had consistently placed Georgia in the Republican, that is, Jeffersonian, column in their reports of election results. The members of Georgia's congressional delegation, 2 of whom were Federalists, were present and raised no objection, as they surely would have done had they believed their state's votes had been placed in the wrong column. And more recent investigation has confirmed that the defects in the state's ballot were merely the result of frontier lawyering, leaving no doubt that the electors intended to vote for the Republican ticket. Same as Jefferson's decision to count the ballot despite its technical defects was also consistent with his conviction, expressed to James Madison in 1796, that ignoring the choice of the people substantially expressed would risk the phenomenon of a pseudo-president. Same as that the vice president, in an age before mass communication, had to rely on news reports and the absence of objections to ensure that he was accurately counting the votes from the duly appointed electors does not remotely suggest that the vice president has unilateral authority to reject the votes from the duly appointed electors and accept fraudulent electoral votes that, as the defendant acknowledges elsewhere, ECF number 114 at 9 to 10. plainly lacked any state backing. Such a course would have resulted in electing what Jefferson referred to as a pseudo-president. The 1824 election. In the election of 1824, CECF number 113 at 25, 29 to 30, 31, 4 presidential candidates received electoral votes, with Andrew Jackson receiving 99 votes. John Quincy Adams receiving 84 votes, William H. Crawford receiving 41 votes, and Henry Clay receiving 37 votes. Because no candidate received a majority of the whole number of electors appointed, the election was sent to the House to choose the president from among the top 3 candidates. U.S. Constitution Amendment 12. Clay, who was disqualified from consideration based on his fourth-place finish, eventually supported Adams, who was elected. C. Rami Fakuri, the most dangerous blot in our Constitution, retiring the flawed Electoral College Contingent Procedure 104 Northwestern University Law Review, 705, 719-20, 2010. Adams later appointed Clay as Secretary of State. Same as. And while Clay vehemently denied the rumor that he had bargained away his support in exchange for the appointment, Jackson described the rumored Adams-Clay agreement as a corrupt bargain. Same as, although the defendant claims that both the election of 1824 and 2020 involved lobbying by one of the presidential candidates, ECF number 113 at 29-30. That generalized and superficial similarity masks crucial distinctions, including that the 1824 election genuinely failed to produce an electoral college winner in a constitutionally mandated resolution by the House. No evidence suggests that any candidate engaged in corrupt and fraudulent conduct to obstruct an accurate count of the electoral votes. The 1876 election. In the election of 1876, CECF number 113 at 25, 29, 31, ECF number 114 at 30. 3 Reconstruction-era Southern states sent competing slates of electors to Congress, with Oregon also sending competing slates for one of its votes. C. Bush, 531 U.S. at 155, Breyer, J., dissenting, Nathan L. Colvin and Edward B. Foley. Lost opportunity, learning the wrong lessons from the Hayes-Tilden dispute, 79 Fordham Law Review 1043, 1045-46, 2010. In Florida, for example, the state canvassing board declared that Rutherford B. Hayes had won the state by 924 votes. But the electors for Samuel Tilden quickly filed suit and obtained a ruling from a state trial court that they were in fact the rightful electors. See John Copeland Nagel, How Not to Count Votes, 104 Columbia Law Review 1732, 1741-42, 2004. In all, 20 electoral votes were in dispute, enough to sway the outcome. Same as, to resolve the dispute, Congress established an electoral commission composed of 5 senators, 5 representatives, and 5 Supreme Court justices. Same as, at 1743-44. The commission ultimately voted 8-7 to award all 20 disputed electoral votes to Hayes, making him the victor. Same as, at 1747. The Electoral Count Act was enacted 10 years later for the explicit purpose of preventing a repetition of the Year of Disgrace, 1876, in which a cabal had determined to debauch the Electoral College. Theodore B. Olson, The Supreme Court and the Presidency, 9 Greenbag 2nd 139, 145, 2006, quoting 18 Congressional Record 30, December 7, 1886, remarks of Representative Caldwell. That a Reconstruction-era election produced a dispute over which electors were duly appointed, triggering a true crisis, Colvin and Foley, supra, above, at 1046. That prompted enactment of the Electoral Count Act, does not remotely imply that, under the Electoral Count Act, a candidate can rely on a slate of fraudulent electors lacking any state imprimatur to discount the votes of the duly appointed electors and generate the illusion of a crisis. The 1960 election. In the election of 1960, CECF number 113 at 25, 29, 31, ECF number 114 at 30, 31, which was Hawaii's first election as a state. The initial vote count there indicated that Richard Nixon had narrowly defeated John F. Kennedy by a mere 141 votes out of some 184,000 casts. Elkin Van Roth, Election Contests and the Electoral Vote, 65 Dickinson Law Review 321, 341, 1961. While a court-ordered recount was underway, and with the outcome still hanging in the balance, slates of electors for both candidates met, voted, and sent their ballots to Congress, with the acting governor's certificate of ascertainment accompanying the ballot of the Nixon electors, in accordance with the then controlling official count. Same as, see 107 Congressional Record 289, January 6, 1961. Noting first certificate of ascertainment, dated November 28, 1960, reflecting 141 vote lead for Nixon. On December 30, 1960, the court overseeing the recount formally found that Kennedy had prevailed by 115 votes. Roth, supra, above, at 341. On January 4, 1961, the acting governor forwarded to the Administrator of General Services a copy of the court decree and his revised certificate, validating the Kennedy electors as the ones who were duly appointed. Noting court judgment and second certificate of ascertainment, dated January 4, 1961. Reflecting 115 vote victory for Kennedy. After considering these documents, Vice President Nixon, presiding over the joint session, found that the second certificate of ascertainment, Vice President held on November 8, 1960. 107 Congressional Record 290, January 6, 1961. Properly and legally portrays the facts with respect to the electors chosen by the people of Hawaii at the election for President and same as, see 107 Congressional Record 289, January 6, 1961. Noting court judgment and second certificate of ascertainment, dated January 4, 1961. Without objection, he therefore instructed the tellers to count the votes in the acting governor's second certificate of ascertainment, awarding Hawaii's votes to Kennedy. Same as, the fact that the 1960 election involved a state revising its certificate of ascertainment to reflect the outcome of a court-supervised recount, in no way implies that a candidate may corruptly submit a fraudulent slate of electors and endeavor to have the vice president treated as valid when it lacks any state-backed legitimacy, and all legal challenges to the election have been rejected in court. Part 11. To be continued. B. The defendant's historical examples do not raise fair notice concerns the 2000 election. Much appreciation to you for giving of your time with us at Motivation at Hand. To know is to know how. We trust you will come back soon.